Hi everyone, in this video I'll be demonstrating the use of the not, and, or boolean operators. In the previous video I have demonstrated how we can use the bool function to give us what a variable or an object evaluates to. Because this is not an empty list, it will evaluate to true. So I'm just gonna show you. And because the second list over here is empty, this will actually evaluate to false. So let's just run this, and we can see that this is what we are getting. So I'm going to write it here as a comment, true and false. Oh, I'll have some space. Okay, so we can use this now in our conditions. What you'll notice that only the third statement here was actually printed. And I'll explain why so. So let's start with the first one over here. We know that this print statement has not been executed because it's not displayed here. But why is that so? So let's try to translate what this line over here means. Now the not will actually give you the opposite of what is evaluated here. We know a list evaluates to true. So we can say that a list is equal to true. So I have a true value here. But because this is saying not, so it's saying the opposite of this. So not true is actually equal to false. It's as simple as that. Now because this whole thing evaluates to false, this statement will not print. Okay. So for this condition for this line to actually execute, this condition has to be true, but it's not. It's actually false. So this is why this line did not execute like we have here. Now let's have a look at the second one, the and. Now with the and, it's saying both of these expressions have to be true for this statement to print. But what do these actually evaluate to? Let's put it in a comment. The first one we know is false because we have done this initially. It's similar to what we have in here. We know this evaluates to false because the list is actually is got some content, so it's the list evaluates to true in this case. So not true is equal to false, and a list 2. Now a list 2 evaluates to false, so and false. This gives us a false, a final answer of false. Now if I wanted to represent this in sorry, this is and. So for this to actually give us true, both of these values, both of these expressions have to be true for this to be true. In this case, if any of these are false, then the whole thing is also false. So once we know this first expression gives us false, there is no point in checking the second one. We know this whole thing evaluates to false. This is why this statement or this line was not executed in the output. Okay, now let's take another example of how if both of these were true. So let's make this happen. Right, so if not, let's make this true. So if not list 2, this will actually give us true, because if I wanted to translate this, a list 2 is equal to false, like we've seen here. Not false is actually true, and a list I have to change this, so I want to make this to evaluate to true. So I'm going to take the first one, which we know is true, and true is equal to true. Okay, so this one will evaluate. Let me just give these different numbers. So 2a, 2b, and so we know this is coming from 2b. This has been evaluated because both of these are true. Let's do another example where one of them is true and see if this is going to work. Okay, so if a list 2, so let's make this false, because a list 2 is false. Okay, so I know that this one is false, and we know this is true. So what we have is false and true. This will actually give us false. So 2c will not evaluate. Okay, so we've only got 2b. Okay, now I can have another example for this one. If I change this to I can have another one. So I can have 1A and 1B. Okay, will this evaluate? But if I want to force this not to, or let's say this didn't evaluate. If I want this to be true, so this will evaluate, I need to look at this condition. Okay, so over here, what I have is not true. But if I actually took the value of list2, this is false. So not false is equal to true. So now I can have 1B evaluated because this is true. So this is an example of when this will be true. Okay, so let's have a look at so in this one, only when both of them are true, when both expressions are true, will this evaluate. Okay, now let's have a look at the OR. Now the OR in this case, usually the AND will be evaluated first. This has the highest precedence. So if I were to number this has the highest. Oh, sorry, that was supposed to be 1. And then after that, AND will evaluate. And then lastly, the OR will evaluate. So what will happen here is this will evaluate first, and then in addition to that value or that result, the AND will evaluate because AND has a higher precedence than OR, and lastly OR will evaluate. So what will this actually give us? Let me write it here as a comment. Sorry, I keep writing the wrong symbols. Okay, so not list. Now we know list was true, so not true, this is actually false. And let's write and because now we have this one evaluated first. Now we have, let's look at this one first. A list2, this one is false because list2 is actually false. So we know that all of this is equal to false. So if I put them in parentheses like this, now all of this evaluates to false. But then we have also this one, or a list is true. So now I have false or true. If any of these is true, then the whole thing becomes true. So this is why we've seen this one being evaluated. Now I can give it an A, like just so we can have more examples. So 3A has been evaluated coming from this expression. Now if this doesn't make sense to you, we can represent this in a mathematical way. So you can think of AND as the think of this as a multiply, and you can think of this as a plus, as a multiply. Now what that means is, and also think of the value true is equal to 1 and the value of false is equal to 0. So I can now translate all of these in terms of 0 and 1 and plus and multiply. Okay, this will also give you a way to understand this if you can't understand it in terms of false, and you know that both of them has to be true for the whole thing to be true. So I can do this, I can represent this in, so this is 0 multiplied by 0 is equal to 0, which is false because 0 is false. Okay, and I can also prove this here as well. So I can say this is 1 multiplied by 1 is equal to 1 because 1 by 1 is equal to 1, which is true because we know 1 is true. So like that, this also can help you do this if you're more of a mathematical person. Okay, so let's do this also here. This is 0 multiplied by 1, which gives us 0. So anything that is 0, any false, so if you've got multiple of these and everything is true, but if only one of them is false, then because we multiply anything by 0 becomes 0, so this is going to evaluate to false, which is equal to false. Okay, so I hope this helps you more. Now let's evaluate this. You can think of now or as the plus. Okay, so let's do it like what I have is, I'll put it in a comment. So what I have is, so this is 0 times 0 plus, which gives us also 0. Okay, this one plus 1. So this gives us 1, because when you have a plus, even if there's a 0, it's still going to be 1, which is equal to true. Okay, let's take more examples of when this will be false. So for this to be false, the value of this has to be also false. So all of this will be false, and this also will be false. Then everything will become false. Let's take an example of when that can be. Okay, so what I have over here, if not a list, okay, so this is false. This is also false, so we can leave it as it is. And if I want to turn this to false, I can just say not. Now the not will force this to give us false. So this will be false over here. And because everything is false, this evaluates to false. So false and false gives us false. Okay, and false or false, so all of this has given us false. This is also false, so everything is false. Now if I were to do this with the numbers, if that helps you better, so this gives us a 0 plus 1, plus 0 gives us 0, will give me false. Now if I run this, and I'll make this B, just so that we know if it's coming out anywhere and it's not being executed. Now I'll show you an example of how if this is false, but all of this is true, this line will execute. Let's take that as an example. Now I'll make this 3C, just so we can be a little bit different. Now if not, now I'm going to force this to be true. So I'm going to choose list 2, because list 2 is evaluating to like we've seen in the beginning, false, because it's empty. And if not true, if not false gives us true. So this is actually true. And a list 2, now I'm going to change this to the first list, a list, and this was true. Now both of these, because evaluate to 1, 1 times 1 gives us a 1, which is a true. Okay, so both of these, if both of these are true, this will be true. Now remember with the and, both of them have to be true for the whole thing to evaluate to false. Like we've seen this example, if one of them was false, then it will evaluate to false. So in this case, both of these are true, so we evaluate to true. Or, now even if I have this as false, so I can keep this as false, then the whole thing will evaluate to true. Because this will be the other way around. It will be is equal to 1 plus 0 gives us 1, gives us true. So if I run this program, this will evaluate. Okay, let's take one more example when if this is only true, but this is false, and this is false, then everything will evaluate to false. Now we've seen in the first one, when the or over here was true, we've actually gotten a true result. But then we've seen over here, when everything was false, then we got a false result. And then we've seen how if the first condition over here was true, and even when this was false, because of the or, we've also gotten a true. Now let's do this again. Now we'll keep this one as false, but I'll change one of these to be false, and you'll see how everything changes to false. So I'll keep this one as it is, but I'll say not over here. Now this will give me the opposite of whatever this is. So this is true. Not true will actually give me false. Okay, and so this will change to 0. This will be 0. So this means this becomes false. Okay, true and false. If any of these is false, we know this is false. Okay, now what I have is false or false. This is obviously false. Okay, which also comes to this one. 0 plus 0 is equal to 0. That's false. So will 3D evaluate? No, it won't, because this whole thing, none of this is true. All of this is giving me as initially false, false, or this is also false. Okay, so it will not evaluate. So from this whole thing, only this one evaluated to true and this one evaluated to true. So these will evaluate. So this is why I've got 3A and 3C. Okay, and I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you in future videos.